All right. Hello again, YouTube. So, this is going to be part two in the new series that I'm going to be starting. Turns out I can't call it Songwriter Stories because there's already a podcast out that does it. So, for now, we're just going to operate under the tentative name of The Songwriter's Story. I know it's not completely original, blah, 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 but it's just a tentative thing and it'll probably change. So, now we're going to talk about part two, which is kind of not just the creative process, but kind of just songwriting in general. And what's kind of inspired me this time is that I was just recently watching YouTube video about the Beatles. And I'm just going to go into this real quick and then we'll kind of start breaking down songwriting and kind of some things looking with it. So I was watching how when the Beatles first got back from Hamburg and they were starting to play at the Cavern Club again, they were kind of missing out on a lot of like basically publicity. All these bands had basically kind of filled the void while they were gone, and they were really kind of struggling because everyone was kind of stealing each other's covers. And you go to the same place and you hear five different versions of the same song. Eventually it gets old. So that's kind of a big thing that led to the Beatles ended up writing their own songs and creating their own stuff. And it baffles me because, I think the music industry today is really still archaic like it was back in the 50s and 60s, where it was really kind of just, what could you do for another artist's song to really kind of get you noticed. Now, back in the day when my band was getting successful, we barely played covers. I mean, at our peak, it was probably 60-40 with covers to originals. And that was just because I needed to write my own songs. And now we'll kind of get into how the songwriter process for me and for a lot of other artists ended up starting. So when I formed my blues trio, I was pretty sure I was going to play original music, and I was also fairly certain of like the genre and direction I wanted to go. Now, I only had about four songs when I started my blues trio. And I'd played in numerous bands for years and I'd done all these things. And kind of tying it back to the Beatles, I really had just showcased my skill by playing for a long period of time, for my age, I guess, playing with a bunch of different high caliber musicians. And I just had the confidence. And that's kind of what the Beatles delivered at the Cavern Club, especially after they came back from Hamburg. They just had a presence and a capability to like just be loud and ruckus and like, entertain. So I knew that was something I was capable of. I'd been doing it with other projects, and I'm like, okay, cool. This is the direction. This is what I want to do. Let's make it happen. So we're rehearsing our first practice with a full trio. We did have another guitarist, but that came in later. But ultimately, we were kind of born as a trio and ended up being just a trio. But we did have three guitars kind of rotated during our time period. But anyway, we did the lineup, and I was like, okay, here are the songs. And literally within one practice, we had all the songs down. That was four songs. So I was like, man, we can do an open mic or something like that. But we couldn't do a show. So yeah, I had to do covers to fill the time slot. So now, what the Beatles were doing when they were coming up with their songs is they were basically trying to use the competition, the healthy competition that was going on with all these venues having the same bands play the same music over and over and over again. They were able to kind of shoe themselves in, originally with Cavern Club and then kind of extend outward, of just like, hey, well, we got our own songs. And yeah, they weren't all good. Not everything was Love Me Do or Please Please Me, but they worked their way up to it, right? And that's kind of what's going to take us into songwriting. So the first four songs I had at that time when I was doing my blues trio were a song called Miss the Train Blues, a song called Tease to Please, and so the very first song I ever wrote that had lyrics, which was called Living for Today, and then a song called Someday, which all of these songs were very easy, and they were just, I think Miss the Train Blues was a lightning in a bottle type thing. I'm going to go into that in a minute, but the three other songs were kind of more of just, hey, you're getting your songwriting chops up, you're writing stuff, you know how to play your instrument, you have some time in, so, this is what I did. Miss the Train Blues was one of the first early examples where I harnessed the flow state. Flow state's going to be another video that I do. It might be part 3, it might be part 4. We'll kind of see. I'm kind of ad hocing this entire thing, and it's kind of just going how I feel. But when I'm going through Mr. Train Blues, where I take my lyrical content from is a lot of time from personal things that have happened to me, things that I know have happened to friends, or when I started developing my chops and, years down the line when I've had a lot of practice doing this, sometimes it's just an idea. It's a thought, it's a story, it's something I make up in my head, and then I put words to it. Next thing you know, it's a song. But very early on when I was writing songs, it was all personal life experiences. So Mr. Train Blues was based off of literally 3 times that I missed the train. I lived in the suburbs of Chicago, and I took the train pretty frequently. So it was pretty easy for me to kind of take the narrative steps. So I'll kind of play one verse and kind of structure everything, and then you'll kind of see where I'm going with it. I'm sitting all awkwardly, and now the camera's all messed up, so let's push it back a little bit. So when I was writing the song, I knew it was going to be a pretty simple blues kind of thing. It's just... All aboard the Heartbreak Express, my baby left me for a new address. I could have gone and stopped a man named Fred, but I had to go and miss the train instead. I got missed the train blues. Oh, missed the train blues. I could have gone and stopped him dead, but I had to miss that train instead, yeah. So, breaking down those lyrics. All aboard the Heartbreak Express, my baby left me for a new address. I could have gone and stopped a man named Fred, but I had to miss the train instead. So that's basically about a time where I was dating this one girl, and things were kind of not cool and everything like that. And she ended up taking a train to go into the city to go do a party with a mutual friend. And Fred was just a made-up name to kind of like fit everything. So as you can see, that's kind of a little bit of my songwriting process right there. So I'm taking a real story that had basically happened, and I'm kind of turning it into something, right? So I was like, okay, that's something, Miss the Train Blues. It has like that kind of good, catchy little vibe and everything like that. And I was taking a story that had happened, and I was kind of just tailoring the words to it. All aboard the Heartbreak Express, my baby left me for a new address. Express address, We kind of default to rhyming and using poetry when we're doing our songwriting, but as we advance, we don't necessarily need to rely on that. I could have gone and stopped a man named Fred, but I had to miss the train instead. Again, keeping the rhymes going. I can't even remember what the guy's name was, but it definitely wasn't Fred. It was like, I don't know, like Brad or something. But it doesn't matter, because the reality of the story is still like, hey, like I had a relationship that wasn't doing that well, and she ended up going to a party and ended up meeting up some other guy, and then, basically the relationship was over. It's still the core element of, Miss the Train Blues. And it's a metaphor. It works on a whole bunch of different levels. The 2 other verses are just other themes kind of relating to that stuff. I'm not going to play them right now. What I might do is I might do like another video where I play the whole song and kind of deconstruct more. But there's other songs in my repertoire that I want to do later on that really showcase more advanced songwriting. And that's going to be for another video, probably like part 4, maybe part 5 type thing. But we're still kind of approaching this from like the ground up, right? Like the first video in the series was kind of like my creative process, how I was kind of capturing something that I did on my Snapchat to kind of like show you guys what a progression is, right? So now we're taking it even further back and kind of like how my early songs were written and what I did. So we had some basic rhyming going on. We took an element that happened in my life. We took a very simple chord progression. I mean, the whole verses are in G, and then we go up to C for the chorus, back down to G, then to a D to an F flat, back into C, into G. So I'm kind of like not really doing anything complex with the guitar. I'm more focusing on accenting what I'm doing. I mean, I'm following the vocal melody of it. I could have gone and stopped him dead, but I had to miss the train instead. I was just having that like nice transition for the lyrical flow to then go back into the root of G, which was kind of like just the whole mechanism of delivery. So going on to the compositional side really quick, with the song being called Miss the Train Blues, I wanted to have that kind of chuck, 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 chuck. And I had that little riff and wow, kind of be like a little bit of a train whistle, right? So I'm taking all these little elements and kind of just really doubling down or even tripling down on what the song is. It's a train song, it's a love song, it's all kind of working together to kind of just deliver this. And this is why it ended up being my single on our EP that we ended up releasing, because I felt it was hands down the most polished song I had at the time. It took a lot of writing elements that I ended up refining and becoming more of my staple later on. And musically speaking, it was a simple song, but it was also a fun song to play. Very iconic one. I mean, there's not a single show that I played that we didn't basically open with this. It was a good thing to kind of catch everyone's attention and get everyone going. So going more back into the songwriting aspect of things, right? So when I realized that we only had so many songs and like we wanted to play shows and we'd done a few open mics and now we were getting offers to do shows and be opening acts for headlining bands and things like that, I'm like, fuck, what am I going to do? I have to write more songs. So we kind of defaulted back to what I did earlier. All right, let's take some stories from real life. So what's some other things we can do? I was kind of thinking, and this is another song that I'm very proud of, just because of how good of it, it's just a good groove. The lyrics are simple, but they're real. And that's kind of like a big thing, right? When we're finding our songwriting steps, we tend to think a story or a narrative is only so good. And we have to either make it super complex and it's so niche and it's going to really resonate and be with something powerful to someone, or we make it extremely generic so virtually anyone anywhere can kind of relate to it. It's really hard to walk an in-between balance where you're doing both of these things and meaning it in a sincere way. A lot of times, especially when we're first doing our songwriting, it doesn't necessarily sound sincere, even if the intent is there. Right? Miss the Train Blues is an easy song for me to convey real emotion because, like I said, the core things that I do are I use real life stories that happen to me. And like I said, if I play the other two verses, it's virtually continuations of one story and mixed in two other stories all together. 3 verses, 3 stories, that's your song. It doesn't matter what elements we take from our lives, from someone else's lives. I'll get onto the whole morality things on that on another video, probably towards the very end of things. We're all influenced by things we hear, actions we do, things like that. So as long as you're able to take something and give a level of sincerity, I think that's really the first part of becoming a good songwriter. So going back into that, when I started writing a bunch of songs, I wasn't really in a competition in the same mindset of the Beatles. Because we didn't really want to play covers. Very quickly, we wanted to get past the whole cover thing. But I was primarily the songwriter. Later on, my group was able to kind of help me. My drummer also wrote a lot of music, and my bassist was kind of dipping his toe into it. And he helped me refine some structure for some songs and give a level of sincerity that I couldn't have done alone. That's another thing with songwriting, right? Not necessarily about collaborating, but just sometimes throwing an idea out there and having another party, whether it's a friend, a family member, or a bandmate, kind of give you their take on it. That may just be that one little element you need to take that song from just being an song to damn, that's a good song, And that's just purely on the songwriting aspect. When it comes to the instrumentation, our compositional skills, that's probably going to be an entire different series that I end up doing, composition versus songwriting. I just wanted to start with songwriting because I feel that's an aspect that's not as popular on YouTube, but also something when it comes to compositional skills, I'm not the best musician. I play multiple instruments, but I'm not a great musician. And even though I teach music at a school, the music that we teach is mostly on the ear training side of things, and I wouldn't say I have a real music theory grasp of things. There are other phenomenal musicians on YouTube, and even just who write books and things like that would be much better suited to it. I am going to make maybe one tie-in video of my compositionals to show how an entire song is created. At the very end of this, I'm going to basically try and write a song in a video and show you guys all the elements that I'm talking about. But we're getting far ahead, so let's bring it all back. So, competition. my competition was more of what other original artists are doing. So I'm starting to open for the bands and I'm trying to hear what their stories are. I'm trying to think what's going on with them. And one of the very first songs I wrote that also captured that same lightning in a bottle effect that Miss the Train Blues did was a song that we shortened to Gots to Get, but originally was called Gots to Get While the Getting's Good. This is a very simple blues song in B. Not a popular blues blues key, but something that just had a really nice groove. And I'm going to just play the first verse again and kind of show you guys some... Well, I mean, let's see if you can identify it. I'll go over it, but let's see if you can identify it. We started a band, we got it right. Started playing shows every night. I'm singing, baby. Look where we're at. I stopped and saying to myself, I've got to get while the getting's good. So, let's break that down a little bit, right? I think the inspiration is pretty obvious. We had started a band and we got it right, and we were playing shows pretty frequently, almost every night. So we're taking a very simple idea, especially as musicians. That first time you start a group project and you start writing songs, or you already have songs and now you're hearing them all completed with a whole group, it's such a unique experience. It's something that I wish that a lot of non-creative or non-musical people had access to, but a lot of them don't. But since we're musicians, or most likely aspiring musicians, if you're watching this, I'm sure you've had that experience. So I wanted to take that energy, that rush, and I wanted to turn it into something that I could play to share to people who weren't musicians. So it's this nice groove, it's very simplistic lyrics, and it's just going on being truth. And I literally wrote this after, I think it was our second or third practice. I didn't show it to the band until after we've been playing a couple of shows, because I just thought, you know, this is such a simple song, and it's so niche at the same time. It's a simple song because it's blues and B, but it's niche because it's really only for musicians. And I happened to play it at a... So my bassist and my drummer went to a community college, and very frequently we would basically just bring our instruments and just play around the campus. I had played it, and my bassist was like, that's pretty good. Why haven't you shown us that? And I was like, I don't know. And then I showed my drummer, and I was just like, all right, cool. Now we have a fifth song. You know, and then very rapidly became 8 songs, 9 songs, 10 songs. Then that, 60-40 ended up being like an 80-20. We would do maybe 2 to 3 covers a set. Or not even a set, a show, basically. That's how rapidly it happened. Now, I'm not going to say every song I wrote was good. Let's tie it back to the first 4 songs I had presented: Miss the Train Blues, Tease to Please, Living for Today, and Someday. Tease to Please was another story-based song, and it kind of continued my blues in G, Miss the Train Blues, and I ended up transposing it to C and kind of just taking like that same vibe and energy. And they actually worked really well together, so it was my B-side to my single. It was Miss the Train Blues into Tease to Please. And very frequently when we would play shows, we would basically do those songs into each other. And then we would do introductions and things like that. If you guys are interested in a potential showmanship and like how to structure your set list, things like that, leave a comment down talking about it. I might make a series about that, because I think live performance is another aspect that people need a bit more refinement on than they think. And there are some musicians who do such a natural, phenomenal job. Maybe they can't put it into words, and they just need a little reference point to kind of help them get started. Maybe I can start a discussion for other musicians. All that stuff aside, right? Tease to Please was a very simplistic song, and it didn't even have a third verse. I kind of started a trend where I would do 2 verses and 3 choruses, kind of inverse of what a lot of people would do. Usually do 3 verses, 2 choruses, or 3 verses, 3 choruses. I had trouble finishing songs, but we didn't have the luxury of not playing them. We had to go out there and do stuff. So Tease to Please is a shining example of when I just couldn't come up with the third verse and was like, fuck it, song's done, let's just do something with it. So I ended up doing 2 guitar solos for that one. And, later on when we were a trio, it was a little hard, but it was still a fun song. Sorry, getting a little nostalgic there for a second. Now we go on to Living for Today and Someday. Living for Today, like I said, was the very first song I ever wrote with lyrics to composition. I don't think this is a good song in any way, shape, or form, but I think it's a great song for your first song. And maybe, again, I will record me doing that one and show it and kind of break things down, analyze it. Basically, I wrote it when I was a sophomore in school. I had played with my second or I'm pretty sure my second band. I was just a vocalist at this time. I was playing drums, but I was trying to work on my vocal ability. And we actually made a song out of it with that band, but it didn't end up working, and it just wasn't really what I heard in my head. But it was basically just kind of analyzing school, and the lyrics weren't as sincere because they weren't really stories. Excuse me. They were more of what I kind of perceived as happening as a sophomore in high school and what would happen when you grow up and all these things and responsibilities and stuff you had to do. So I was thinking about just living for today. That's why it was the chorus, and that's why it's the name of the song. It was just like, screw what's going to happen in the future. Screw everything that happened in the past. We're living for right now as a sophomore in high school. And if you're cringing at all like I am, yeah, that's kind of how the song is. It's just analyzing things in 2007 when I was a fucking sophomore. And now we get to Someday. So Someday was a song where I wanted something to just jam on. And I stupidly kept shopping the song around as our acoustic one. And it's like, no, the lyrics were so generic and not safe. They just didn't really mean anything. There was literally no meaning to these songs. It was just someday I'm breaking out of this town. Someday I'm gonna get my feet off the ground. Someday I'm gonna quit fucking around. Like literally, that's it. It's like that's kind of virtually the whole song. It's just someday I'm gonna do something. Someday I'm gonna be someone. And I felt it was always a good song to kind of close the set with because it really tied everything together. It's like, all right, I know we have low chances of success, but I'm gonna keep on going, and I'm just gonna get there, and I'm gonna make it someday. And that was literally the chorus of the song. I'll make it someday. So that's a little bit of the early work that I did, and then some of the mentality behind it. So I realized quickly, we needed to write more songs. So I would take more things that had happened in my life. I started incorporating things that had happened in other people's lives, and I would try to not necessarily change it, but not necessarily copy pasta. It's a fine balance. But these are the things that we have access to, and this is kind of the things that we need to do in order to write better work. These songs are songs I would still proudly perform today, but they are not my best work, and I have come such a long way because I just am not shy about it anymore. There are so many songs I've written that I've not finished because I just can't put the words that I want to there. But there's a lot of songs I've been able to come back to years later at a time and basically finish because I finally had that sincere, genuine moment that I could finally put into a proper format and deliver. And it sucks because there's at least 7 or 8 songs I wrote during our peak time with my blues trio that I finished lyrics for within the last few years myself. And it's like, man, if we would have performed those songs, like that really would have helped put us even further along than we already got. So I guess to kind of wrap everything up, that's a little bit more in depth on the creative process. The first part was to kind of show me working through it as I'm doing it. This time is more of kind of an analytical, like, okay, this was where I draw a lot of my influence from. This is kind of how I utilize these references, and this is what an end product could sound like. Granted, I only played portions of the songs for you, but I think you kind of understand where my creative process is and how to go from there. I'm not really sure how a lot of other musicians do it, but I would say this is probably a universal standard. If you're ever in doubt on how to write a song or what to go for or what to do, strip it back all the way to basics. Think about a memory that always sticks in your head. Think about a story that you heard your friend tell. Think about an incident that happened the other day. There's always something that you can do. It's a marriage of skills between your compositional abilities and your songwriting abilities, but depending on how you like to write your songs, as long as you can play a chord progression behind it, you'll be able to take whatever your idea is and put it out there. Some musicians write their music before they write their lyrics. Other musicians flip-flop that. They write their lyrics before they write their music. I, for a very long time, used to write the music first and then write the lyrics, and found that was a lot harder for me. It was much easier for me to write some lyrics and then eventually put a chord progression to it and write the music. However, I wasn't able to usually finish my songs quickly. So in my early period, having music and then throwing lyrics to it where I already had a structure was a lot better because I was able to churn out more things faster, which, like I said, during that time period was pretty critical. So, I know this one's kind of not as structured, but I wanted to cover some angles. And like I said, I think kind of what I'm going to be doing with this for a while is just seeing something on YouTube, hearing about a musician or artist, and kind of just tying it and going into more depth because I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And, think about it. The Beatles, the whole reason they were writing their originals was because any covers that they came out with, they were already being taken by the following bands, the following gig. So they're like, shit, what do we do? Well, no one's going to steal your originals, right? Write your originals. Get that out there. And yeah, they got laughed off stage a couple of times, but just a handful of people liked those songs. And that gave Paul and John just the right amount of motivation to keep writing, keep working, and end up being, the greatest group to ever exist. So I think maybe the next part that I'm going to go on to, besides the flow state, is you're going to write a lot of bad work. Like, spoiler alert, you're going to write a lot of bad songs. You're going to write a lot of songs that if you end up recording them and you play it back to yourself, you're going to cringe 10, 15 years from now. Who knows? Depending on how well your songwriting ends up developing, it could be 2 years from now. You'll just be like, oh my God, I can't believe that's what I was thinking at the time. It doesn't matter. It's a muscle, right? It's a skill. We have to do it more in order to get better at it. So don't feel ashamed. Take something, try to put music to it, and go from there. If you're the other way around, if you have confidence in your compositional skills, write some music, throw some lyrics at it. If you like writing lyrics, don't worry about the compositional thing. Just get something out there and talk to your bandmates, talk to a friend, have them put the chord progression behind it, and just see where it goes. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to share this time. Like I said, I'm not really structuring these, and as you can see, because each one's averaging about a half hour long, I should probably start doing that. But I'm still at that point where I don't really have a lot of people watching, and who knows, maybe I personally like doing these kind of formats. So we'll see. But yeah, we'll continue the story, this series for a little while now, on top of the other things I plan on doing with this channel. So yeah, for now, I guess we'll tentatively call it the Songwriters story, and we'll just continue the series thus. So let me know any comments, questions, concerns you guys have, and what your songwriting process is, and kind of what you guys do with it. I don't really care much about the interaction on the YouTube policy. I like the discussion because I'm a musician. I want to see if there's people who are doing stuff better than me, and I would also like to help people who are struggling. So leave them down in the comments. Stand by for part 3 and onwards, and y'all have yourselves a good one.